The rain had been falling for an hour before the black car turned into the quiet residential street, and the doctor was already standing at her window watching for it, the way she had stood at that same window, twice a month for 9 quiet months. The bay window of her front room office faced a sycamore and a slow stretch of sidewalk where children walked their bikes home. And the man who stepped out of the back of that car had taught himself, over the long careful arc of these 9 months, to look at her sycamore the way other men looked at a church. She let him in herself. She always did. Her receptionist did not work the late hours she had set aside for him, and there were no other patients on the books between 5 and 7 on a Tuesday. The arrangement had been his condition, and it had been, in its quiet way, hers too. She did not want her other patients to see who came down the carpeted hallway to the small consultation room at the back of her house. He did not want anyone in his world to see him walk into the front of it. "Doctor," he said, the way he always said it flat, even, the title carrying the only courtesy she had ever heard him give a word. "Come in out of the rain," she said. He was a large man, broad at the shoulders, expensively coated, with the kind of stillness that made the hallway smaller. She had stopped being afraid of that stillness in their second month. She had stopped pretending to herself that she did not understand the deference of the 2 men who stayed in the car at the curb in their 5th. He had never told her what he did for a living. She had never asked. They had agreed, with the small, careful words people use when they are agreeing not to lie, that he was a man under a great deal of professional pressure who needed an hour, twice a month, to learn how to breathe. They sat, she on the soft chair by the lamp, he on the plain couch by the window. The rain made the small room feel further from the street than it was. She set her notebook on her knee and did not open it. She had not opened it in 3 months. She had learned that the moment she lifted the pen, his eyes went to her hand, and his mouth went quiet, and she had decided long ago that the only useful hour for a man like this was the hour in which no one was writing anything down. "You slept," she said. "I slept. How many hours?" 5, maybe 6. "That is the most you have given me since March." His mouth moved, not a smile, but the thing his mouth did when she said something true. He looked at the rain on the sycamore. He told her, in the slow, careful sentences he had grown into in her room, about a dream of his mother that had not made him sit upright at 3 in the morning the way the old dream did. He told her he had eaten a meal at his own kitchen table with his wife and his youngest daughter on Sunday, and had not once looked at the window. He told her his hands had stopped shaking on the steering wheel. She listened. She watched the man, and the room, and the rain. At 10 minutes to 7, she said the closing thing she always said, that he had done good work today, that she would see him in 2 weeks, and he stood and put his coat on with his back to her, and at the door he turned and said the thing he did not usually say. "Doctor, thank you." She walked him to the front of the house. The car pulled away. She locked the door, set the alarm, and stood for a moment in the hall with her hand flat on the wood, the way a woman stands when a long-held breath finally goes out of her. Then she went into the kitchen and put the kettle on. She thought, as the kettle climbed, that he had been her hardest patient and her most rewarding one. She thought briefly and without resentment of her husband, dead 18 months now, who would have laughed at the notion of a man like that crossing her doorstep, and would have, in his quieter moments, told her she was probably the only person in the city he should be crossing it to. The kettle clicked off. She poured. She did not yet know that 100 miles north of the rain on her sycamore, on a stretch of interstate where a different rain had not yet started, a colleague of hers was driving home from a conference and would not arrive. She heard about it the next morning in the small staff lounge of the clinic where she kept a Wednesday practice. A young receptionist was crying. A senior partner was on the phone. The dead woman had been her closest friend in the profession, a sharp, kind clinical psychologist named Hannah, with 2 grown sons and a husband who taught math at a state school. And the police were calling it a robbery gone wrong at a service plaza. Hannah had stopped for coffee. Hannah had been shot once in the parking lot. Hannah's bag was missing. Hannah's car was still there. The doctor did not cry in the lounge. She drove home. She sat in the kitchen where she had sat the night before, with her tea, and stared at the sycamore through the window. The grief was a slow, wide thing that did not yet have edges. She thought of Hannah's husband. She thought of the two sons. She thought of the lecture she and Hannah had given together in March on professional boundaries in difficult cases, and how Hannah had teased her afterward about the patient she would not name. She thought, distantly and without yet understanding why, of a service plaza, and a coffee, and a coincidence she did not like. It was 3 days later, at Hannah's wake, that the thing she did not like became the thing she could not unsee. She had stayed late at the house to help Hannah's sister wash glasses. The kitchen radio was on low. The 11 o'clock report came on. A regional broadcaster, reading the police bulletin, said that investigators were now looking into a possible link between Hannah's killing and a separate incident 2 nights earlier at a roadhouse off the same exit, in which a man identified as an associate of a regional organized crime figure had been the subject of a verbal altercation with a woman matching the broadcaster's careful description of Hannah. The broadcaster did not name the figure. The broadcaster did not need to. The doctor set the glass she was drying back down in the sink. Her hand was steady. Her hand had been steady through everything in her life that mattered. She finished the glasses. She drove home. She sat in her car in her own driveway for a long time before she went inside. Inside, she did the thing she had taught 100 patients to do when a thought arrived too large to hold. She wrote it on a piece of paper. She wrote, "A colleague of mine has been killed after a chance encounter with one of my patient's men. My patient does not know this. My patient cannot know this from me. The seal of this room is the only thing I have ever been certain about," she wrote underneath. "And if she was killed because she saw something she should not have seen, then any woman who knows what I know is now standing where she stood." She folded the paper into quarters. She put it in a small wooden box at the back of her desk drawer. She did not sleep that night, but she lay still in the dark and listened to the house breathe. By the second Tuesday, after the wake, she had decided. She had not decided to break the seal. She had decided to do something harder than that. She had decided to behave in the careful small ways a doctor can behave, exactly as if nothing in her had changed, and to watch, with the trained quiet she had spent her whole life learning, for the one moment when the man on her couch told her, without meaning to, whether he already knew. He came at 5. The rain was light. He sat. He looked at her face the way he always looked at it, flat, careful, reading the room, and he said, before she had spoken, "Are you well, doctor?" "I am tired," she said. "A friend of mine died last week. I am sorry I am bringing it into the room." He went very still. He went still in the particular way he went still when something inside him moved. It was not a guilty stillness. It was the stillness of a man who had been told, in plain language, that someone in front of him was carrying a weight, and who was deciding what kind of man to be about it. "What was her name?" he said, after a long moment. She told him the first name only. He nodded once. He did not look at the window. He said, "I am sorry for your loss." He said it the way her grandfather had once said the same words across a kitchen table to a neighbor. He did not say anything else. They worked the hour. He talked about his mother again. He talked about a thing his 8-year-old grandson had said at a soccer game. She listened, and she watched. When he stood at the end of the hour, he paused at the door longer than he ever had before. "Doctor," he said, "if you ever feel you are not safe in your house, you tell me. You do not have to tell me what about. You tell me." She did not answer at once. The seal of the room was a wall behind her, and she could feel it. The thing he had just said was a door opening sideways in that wall, and she could feel that too. "Thank you," she said. He left. She sat in the room for a long time after the car had gone, with the lamp still on and the rain still soft on the sycamore. She understood, then, 2 things that did not contradict each other, and would have to live, from now on, in the same chest. She understood, first, that he did not know that whatever his man at the roadhouse had been or done, the man on her couch had not been told that the woman who died had been her friend. She understood that because of the way the air in the room had changed, when she had said the word friend, he had not braced. He had been moved. A man who had ordered a thing braces. A man who learns of a stranger's wound is moved. The training in her told her the difference. She understood, second, that he had just promised her without naming a thing, without violating the careful agreement of their room that nothing of his world would touch her door. She did not, in that moment, know yet what to do with that promise. But she put it next to the folded paper in the small wooden box, and she let herself sleep that night for the first time in 3 weeks. The week that followed was the week she learned what kind of doctor she was. A man came to the door on Thursday afternoon. He was polite. He was well dressed. He said he was conducting a survey for the Regional Medical Board on patient privacy in residential offices, and might he ask a few questions about her after-hours practice. He smiled, a small, thin smile that did not move his eyes. She told him, pleasantly, that the medical board did not conduct door-to-door surveys, and that he was free to put his questions in writing through her professional address. She closed the door. She locked the door. She watched through the side window of the sitting room as he stood for a moment on the steps, and then walked back to a dark sedan parked 4 houses down. The sedan did not pull away. The sedan sat at the curb until the streetlights came on. She did not call the police. She did not call her patient. She did, in the quiet way her dead husband had once shown her, slide a chair under the back door handle, take a battery-operated lamp from the hall cupboard, and sit through the long evening in the kitchen with her phone on the table and her front window blinds half drawn. At 9, the front doorbell rang. She walked into the hall. She looked through the small high pane. Her patient was standing on the step, hatless in the new rain. No coat, no car at the curb. She opened the door. He did not come in. He stood on the step with the rain on his hair and looked at her the way she had, in 9 months, never seen him look at anyone. "I came to ask you a thing in your house once," he said, "because I was a man who did not know how to ask anywhere else. I would not come like this if I were not sure. I would not come like this." "Sure of what?" "That a man parked 4 doors down has no business on this street tonight. I have spoken to the man. He will not be back. He was not mine. He was sent by a man who thought I would care if he made me think you had said a thing to me you did not say. That man is finished in this city by morning. He will not touch your door. He will not look at your house. The rule of my house is that this door is the one door in this city my house does not see." She looked at him. She thought, with the calm that had carried her through her husband's last illness and through her colleague's wake and through 9 months of Tuesday afternoons in this very hall, that the seal of a room is not a wall. The seal of a room is a promise. The man on her step had just kept it, on his side, more carefully than any patient she had ever had. "Thank you," she said. "Come in, out of the rain." He shook his head once. "Not tonight, doctor. You should not be seen letting me in tonight. I will come Tuesday, the regular hour, and we will speak about my mother, the way we always do." He turned. He walked down the wet path. A car she had not noticed pulled away from the corner. The sycamore dripped. The street settled. She closed her door, slid the chair from under the back door handle, and stood for a long moment in the hall with her forehead on the wood. She thought of Hannah, who had taught her how to teach. She thought of her husband, who had taught her how to listen. She thought of the man in the rain who had just taught her, without meaning to, that a person can be both the danger and the wall against it. She walked back into the kitchen. The kettle was still warm. She poured another cup. She opened her drawer, took out the small wooden box, took the folded paper out of it, and read what she had written by the soft kitchen light. Then she opened the box again, took out a clean sheet, and wrote a single new line beneath the old. She wrote, "He did not know, and when he learned, he stood in my rain." She folded the new sheet. She put both papers back in the box. She locked the box in the drawer. She turned out the light. Upstairs, the bedroom window looked down on the sycamore, and for the first time since her colleague's wake, she opened the window an inch and let the clean, cool air come in. She slept the way a person sleeps when a long-held breath finally goes out of her, and when she woke on Wednesday morning, the rain had stopped and the sycamore was still standing, and on the doorstep, in a plain envelope with no card, was a single white flower of the kind her colleague had loved, left there by a hand that had taken care, even in grief, not to be seen. She put the flower in a small glass on her kitchen sill. She stood looking at it a long time. Then she went into her office, sat in the soft chair by the lamp, and opened her appointment book to the Tuesday after next, where, in her own careful hand, his initial was already written. She traced the letter once with her finger. She let it stand. The hour, she thought, would be quiet. The seal would hold, and the woman who had been her friend would not, anywhere in this city, be forgotten by a single soul who had loved her, including the one soul whose grief, for reasons no one but a doctor in a small back room would ever know, had stood in her reign.